Welcome to this explainer. Ever wondered how the perfect peach tree can produce bushels of fruit with ease? Well, it all starts with the way you prune it. Today, we're unlocking the absolute maximum potential of your orchard.
I'll let you in on a little secret. Those massive, healthy yields, they literally don't happen by accident. It is almost entirely by design. If you get the pruning right, I promise you, the tree is going to do all the heavy lifting for you.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at the bowl-shaped crown, then tool prep, the step-by-step pruning process, how to avoid some really common mistakes, maintenance and aftercare, and we'll wrap up with some final tips.
Starting off with Section 1, Introduction to Bowl-Shaped Crown Pruning, and Understanding the Anatomy of Your Tree.
So before we even think about picking up a pair of shears, we've got to visualize the final goal. You really need to see the shape in your mind's eye. The absolute foundation of peach tree pruning is what we call the open center or the bowl-shaped crown. Basically, this is a tree structure that completely lacks a central vertical leader. Imagine the shape of a donut or, a wide, empty bowl. You are deliberately removing that main upward-pointing central branch to literally force the canopy to grow outward in a ring.
Now, why go to all this trouble, right? Well, peach trees are incredibly light-hungry. If the interior gets shaded out, that inner wood dies off pretty fast. By opening up the center, sunlight can penetrate deep into the canopy, and more light means brilliant fruit color and far superior bud development. Plus, this open shape creates maximum airflow, so when it rains, the leaves dry out super fast, which is absolutely your best natural defense against devastating fungal diseases like brown rot. And, just from a practical standpoint, this structure keeps your fruit down at a really manageable 7 to 8 feet. That means harvesting is an absolute breeze, right from the ground.
Moving on to Section 2. Necessary tools and preparation. This is all about hygiene before horticulture.
This phase is incredibly crucial, but it's so often skipped. Listen, your pruning is only ever as good as the tools you use. Dull, dirty shears? They're practically a super highway for spreading diseases like cytospora canker from one tree to the next. So, step 1, scrub off all that old sap and soil. Step 2, sharpen those shears. You want to match the factory bevel, which is usually a 33 to 45 degree angle, to ensure a crisp cut that heals up fast. And step 3, you absolutely must disinfect.
Now let's talk disinfectants, because this is a really interesting point. A lot of folks just instinctively reach for bleach, usually a 1:9 ratio. And yeah, it is highly effective against bacteria and fungi, but man, it is deeply corrosive to your expensive steel tools. If you use it, you've got to rinse and dry them immediately. But check this out. Isopropyl alcohol, 70% or higher, is a total game changer. It works instantly on contact, evaporates super quick, and best of all, no rust. It's almost always the safer choice for your gear. Okay, timing is the next massive factor, and this actually might surprise you. Winter is a surprisingly high-risk time to prune a peach tree. When the tree is totally dormant, its cambium layer isn't active, so it can't form a protective callus. That means every single cut you make stays an open, weeping wound for weeks, just inviting canker spores right inside. But contrast that with late spring, right around bloom time. The risk drops dramatically because the actively growing tree rushes to rapidly seal those wounds, effectively locking out the pathogens.
All right, Section 3, the step-by-step pruning process. Let's execute some cuts. This is the action phase. Let's get you out into the orchard, shaping that tree with total confidence. Here is your exact order of operations, and you really never want to deviate from the sequence. Step 1, always start with sanitation cuts. Get rid of anything dead, damaged, or diseased. Step 2, take out that central leader to open up the bowl. Step 3, select your structural foundation, which is your 3 to 4 main scaffold branches. And finally, Step 4, thin out the interior. You want to remove crossing branches and those tiny, weak little shoots that'll honestly only ever produce inferior fruit anyway.
Now, when you're making those initial structural cuts on a really young tree, you've got to set the primary trunk height. The ideal measurement here is just 50 to 60 centimeters from the ground. I know, it feels drastically, almost uncomfortably low when you do it, but establishing this low crotch is exactly what keeps the mature tree at that highly manageable, ladder-free picking height we talked about earlier. And once that height is set, take a good look at the angle of those 3 or 4 scaffold branches you're keeping. You want them angled roughly 30 to 45 degrees from the horizontal. So why this specific angle? It's kind of a Goldilocks zone. It mathematically balances the horizontal spread you need for capturing sunlight with the sheer vertical strength required to hold up literally hundreds of pounds of fruit without the branch snapping.
Next up, Section 4, Common Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. Let's look at the improved vase. we really need to talk about the most frequent and honestly heartbreaking structural failure we see in peach trees. The crazy thing is, one tiny adjustment at planting time prevents it entirely. This is often the difference between a tree that lives for 5 years and one that thrives for 20. In the classic vase shape, the main branches all originate from the exact same spot on the trunk, basically in a tight ring. Since there's no vertical space between them, that connection point is incredibly weak. A heavy fruit-laden branch can literally split the trunk right down the middle. The improved vase, on the other hand, staggers those branches vertically. The absolutely crucial detail for this improved vase is making sure your 3 to 4 scaffold branches are spaced 10 to 15 centimeters apart, vertically, up the main trunk. They should never grow from adjacent buds. By giving them this little bit of vertical breathing room, you lock in immense structural integrity. Your tree can now bear massive weight without splitting open.
Which brings us to Section 5, Maintenance and Aftercare. This is all about guarding your harvest.
Making the right cuts is literally only half the battle. What happens right after those cuts are made is going to dictate the long-term health of your orchard. The main takeaway here is that a freshly pruned tree is a vulnerable tree. So any cut larger than 2 centimeters needs to be sealed immediately. You can use grafting wax or a proper pruning paint to block out moisture and spores. Next, a protective fungicide spray is pretty much mandatory to ward off brown rot. And back in the shed, clean and oil your tools with something like WD-40 so they don't rust. Oh, and finally, keep a really close eye on the bark near the base for peach borers. Their damage is basically an open door for fatal diseases.
Finally, Section 6, Conclusion and Encouragement. Getting your perfect peach tree.
Just a quick heads up before we summarize our blueprint. Please remember that trees can vary greatly depending on specific climate zones, soil types, and unique varietals. So while these are the gold standard principles for sure, it's always a really smart move to consult a local agricultural extension or an expert for any challenges unique to your neck of the woods.
We have definitely covered a lot of ground today, but the core formula for a perfect peach tree is actually remarkably straightforward. Use perfectly clean, sharp tools. Make your cuts in the late spring when the tree can rapidly heal. And always prioritize that vertically staggered open center shape. It maximizes sunlight, airflow, and structural strength. Which leaves us with just one final question for you. Are your shears sharp, sterilized, and ready for the orchard? You now have the exact blueprint to unlock massive, healthy yields from your peach trees. So don't wait. Get out there, start shaping that perfect open bowl, and get ready for an incredible harvest. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy pruning!